Welcome, Stephanie. Thank you so much for coming on Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books.
Thank you for having me.
I could not be more excited to talk about American Daughter, a memoir, and I'm just showing the cover to anybody watching on YouTube. Stephanie, this book, I opened it early on Saturday morning and I was like, well, I'll just read a few pages now and then I'll go, I don't know, work out or do something or deal with whatever. I stayed in one spot for 4 hours and read the entire thing. I could not put the thing down. It's so good. It is so
Oh,
good. So
thank you. I'm
congratulations.
so happy to hear that from you. And I can't wait to hear what you think about it and what your
Yes.
thoughts are.
Well,
Can't
first of
wait.
all, why don't you tell listeners what this memoir is about? I know it's you
And
go with
you read the memoir. It's so hard to say in just
yeah.
a brush stroke, but basically, after about 50 years of complete silence and living in shame with my story, I decided to kind of come clean and write my story of my past of living homeless in foster care, a severely mentally ill mother with multiple personalities, drug addictions, and just kind of this life of homelessness that I had all the way up until I got married. Well, simultaneously, my mother was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and I was estranged from her because of a stalking order of her trying to take my life and burn my house down and, horrendous things. I decided at that time it was time for me to get answers. And I went in to do a series of interviews with my mother because that's the only way she would talk to me is do an interview with her. And then what came out, the shocking, horrific crime that happened against her, and then the reconciliation and the process of healing our relationship, and many, many other layers that come out in this memoir and in my book, to the point of the end where my mother and I fully reconcile.
But it's so much more than that. As
Yeah.
if that wasn't enough. I mean, that's what was so remarkable about this book. So first, it's all of just your ability to overcome the traumas of your early childhood and your retelling of all of what happened to you and
Mhm.
all those scenes where I'm literally sitting there with my hand over my mouth reading because it's oh my gosh, I can't believe this
Mhm.
happened. But it's also what I thought was really beautiful. Well, first of all, I'm so excited to talk about this. I can't get words out. There's this whole part of your background. I don't want to give it away because I had no
Yeah.
idea it was coming, but your own story throughout history, sort of where your family came from, was also
Yeah. Yeah.
unbelievable, especially the way you unveiled it the way you did. And the third part that I really loved is that it's really a love story between you and
Yeah.
your husband. And
Yeah.
you had this whole moment of almost cheating or,
Yeah.
it's really a love story. So I feel
Yeah.
like it has every element, the mother, the
Mhm.
adversity, the love story, it was just, and it's true, which is what the craziest part is. And
It's a
oh my
true
gosh,
story.
anyway, even your mother's ability to overcome adversity. Oh my gosh. So
There
wait,
is
there's
so many layers for me. I appreciate how you brought what I said and bringing in what you said because it is hard to really distill it the way um, it's almost impossible to distill it into this brush stroke. So, but we can go into more. But you did a good job.
thank you. Thank you. Um, why did you write this? Why did you decide to take your story and put it in memoir form and do
Well,
such a good job?
I started writing the minute I started working with my mom. Even before that, I started to write my story before I knew the whole story. But once this started to come out and these revelations in my relationship with my mom and really my failing in my marriage that was able to be restored, just everything needed to be told. And it also just started to feel like a story that was for everybody, and it is. And it's this American story. This is the story of the failings of America. I fell through every crack. I fell through the education crack, my mother a mental health crack. Our family just fell through every crack possible. But then I'm also the American story of being able to succeed and the opportunities that I've been able to have. And it's just in a story of our history, even. I mean, my family is the history of our country that came out of this. So there's just so many reasons why this story needed to be told. people will say, and I was just telling my staff, we were talking about this, that I'm brave, and it's not about being brave. I feel free. I feel free. I don't have to live in hiding. I don't have to live in shame. I'm an open book, and there's something just so freeing about that.
It's literally you are an open book that is now sitting here open on my desk. So like literally you are. Yeah, I could imagine that would be freeing. I mean, I don't know how
Yeah.
you were carrying around that heavy load for so long. I don't know like how corrosive that must have been in so
Yeah.
many ways. Like keeping all those secrets. What was that like?
It's exhausting. It was exhausting. I before I could even meet with somebody, so my husband had a big career as a CEO, and I was always having to meet and entertain people, and I'd have to make a plan of what questions and how would I answer them before every time I met a new person. If they said, "Where are you from? Where'd you go to school?" I mean, these are how many siblings do you have? Well, I don't know. One was kidnapped. I don't know if I should add him. I mean, there isn't there was no way for me to tell my story and be normal. It was exhausting. So that's why I just say I'm just so free now. It's all out there, and I don't feel. I mean, it was like I had all this external success, but inside, I was just broken. I was empty. I was a shell of a person before I started this, and now everything's integrated. I get to be a whole person. I have even just my name, Thornton. I took my name back. I didn't even have a name. I didn't have a grandparent. I didn't have a cousin. I had nobody. I had no history that I knew of. So I took it all back, and I'm just so whole now.
Wow. It's amazing. It's just amazing.
And I don't know what it's like to have had these things either. So even when I was living in the back of a station wagon eating seaweed, I didn't know any better, and I wasn't unhappy. I wasn't unhappy. I was with my siblings. We were all together. I truly love the beach still. We lived in the beach, and I've had to come to terms really through the process of writing my book. I lived outside. I lived in a car. I went to the bathroom outside. We ate seaweed. We didn't This was my life that I had, and I didn't know any different. And even some today, it shocks me. We were living like animals outside.
Wow.
And, you know, and that is sometimes just staggering for me.
And you even like bring in your own parenting in this book, right? And even the
Yeah.
way you adopted your daughter. I mean, this international adoption saga, I mean, that
Yeah.
ended beautifully
Yeah.
with your daughter, but even your point of view of being able to say, look, like this was what my daughter was like when she was 11 and listen to what was going
Mhm.
on with my mother and what was going on with me. And yet
Yeah.
you have a child who's being raised, three children, but that are being raised totally quote unquote normally, right? In a
Yeah.
very comfortable environment. And yet look what happened. I mean, I don't know. It's just,
I tried to raise them idyllic, I tried to be the opposite. And, I tried to give my daughter everything that I didn't have, which isn't always great at all. And that was that facade that I put on that you read about, that I think we all do in a way. We can hide behind this. I could hide behind this interior design business or all of this, but it's still there,
and so
you
not
know.
only do you still do interior design or do you only run your schools?
I just do it for fun. If you follow me on Instagram, I think you're following me. I'm
I am.
constantly redesigning stuff. I'm constantly styling, and I do that for the school, but I also it's just my fun passion. I don't have time to work with clients anymore. I just run the schools, and then now I'm doing a lot of philanthropic work and stuff with the book and starting a podcast and, starting on my next book. But yeah, but design, you'll see on my Instagram. It's
Wait,
my love.
slow down and go back for a second. Tell me about the
Yeah.
next book and the podcast.
So I'm starting a podcast called Overcoming, and I'm interviewing extraordinary people who've been through extraordinary circumstances who are come out on the other side to share their stories, their strategies, to help inspire other people to share their stories and to gain more strategies on how to overcome. So it's all about overcoming next year. Don't we all need that right now after the pandemic?
Yes.
And so that's what I'm doing. My book working title is called Overcoming. So it's going to be more I didn't share everything in American Daughter.
Oh
That
my
was like,
gosh. That I find hard to believe. Oh my gosh.
oh no, no. I scaled it. People say, "Wow, did you just really let it out?" And it's like, no, we actually had to edit a lot out for this book to make sure that this book was just perfectly aligned with the story. There's still more of overcoming.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait. I
Because I
literally
mean, if you think about being homeless all the way up until I got married, I was in and out of cars, foster homes. I fell through that whole system, aged out, got kicked out my senior year for not getting my tags done on my car. So I had to live with no parenting, no guidance. Can you even imagine your senior year? I think about my kids and how vulnerable they are, and to just be in their car, staying in somebody's sofa their senior year. I mean, it's just astounding um, how much I fell through these cracks.
So what is that like then? If your child complains about something, are you just like, "Don't even?"
They don't like me to do that. They're not into that. I've never been like that. I never shared my story with my kids. They never knew until I wrote this book. They only had glimpses of seeing my mother. They knew there was a stalking order, but I shielded them from everything. So they found out about my story when I wrote this book.
Oh my gosh, and what was that like for you?
Well, I just wanted to protect them from everything. And
No, what was it like having them now learn it? What was that experience like? Did you hand them the copy of the manuscript or like
literally,
literally you were just
yeah,
like, "Here,
literally,
this
here,
is what
here it
happened."
is. If you want to read it, here's the story. But they lived also with their mother not being truly a whole person either. And I hate that about the story because they didn't get to find out about their history. Now, if I was raising my kids now, I'd be sharing these wonderful, successful things from my family. I'd be sharing the horrific parts of our American heritage that we all have, in terms of the Washingtons, the horrible things they did, the good things that they did. But they never got to grow up knowing their heritage. Well, my grandkids will. But if I had this story, that would have made them more whole too, instead of a mother who had no history, no background, and shared nothing.
Well, don't beat yourself up. I mean, no, seriously. I mean, I'm sure you've done an extraordinary job. You can sense how much you love and dote on your kids in the book,
Yeah.
and I'm sure they're amazing people in their own rights, and I'm sure you did a fantastic job. So, whatever you needed at that point to get through, like, that's what you needed then, and now you're ready for
Yeah.
this. So,
Yeah, exactly. And I don't have any regrets. I do feel like I really tried hard having no skills. I mean, if you think about it, I had no parents. I was really homeless, orphaned, and then I decided to have a family with no skills. So I just had to muddle my way through. And for me, being as loving and doting on them was a safe thing to do, you know? So
oh my gosh. And so when the process of writing this, were you, like, sobbing over your keyboard? What was that like?
oh my gosh, it depends on the parts, it depends. So when I found out about my mother and what happened to her, so during the interview when she
Yeah.
told me what had happened, and she said, "Go look it up in the papers, 1953, and you'll find out." And I still didn't believe her. You have to understand what my mom's been in and out of psych wards over 100 times in my lifetime, or jail. So anything she says, you would take with a grain of salt. So to find out what happened and to have never asked the questions that I wish that I had earlier, but it was about the right timing. To find out what happened to her felt like somebody kicked me in the stomach 100 times, and just the physical pain of what she went through, being abducted and gang raped, is just it was horrific. But it also then created a lot of compassion that I had for her. Um, finding out, even if you read the first chapter and my mother describes trying to end her pregnancy with me. Just like we're sitting here talking, my mother told me with no emotion, and I wrote it that way. If you read chapter 1, this is right out of her mouth, exactly how it went down in the interview. She had no feeling or compassion. Stuff like that is really hard to learn and to process. So that was hard. And then but what I'd like to say is that once I realized what happened to my mother, her personalities, her mental health, her addiction, it all made sense.
Mhm.
It all made sense at that point, and my compassion for her grew. But also, I was to a point in my life where I mattered. I never mattered. I never mattered to my mother. I never mattered in the system. I never mattered. I matter now. And I mattered, and I was still going to get the answers, and she was still going to keep going through with the interviews, whether these interviews went on for 2 years.
Oh my
She
gosh.
wanted them to stop. But I set the next one up week after week, until I was done. And that was 2 years later, but the interviews went from being interviewing her to us having a relationship and forming a bond and love that we never had. That was very meaningful.
Well, the way that you wrote it and the way you discovered and shared your discoveries, like we
Yeah.
all, well, I can't talk for anybody else. Now I need to find people who've read this book so I can talk to them about it too. But like
In your
in my
group,
book club, I'll do it.
your
Yes,
book club.
in my book club. We'll do it in my book club. But like we all felt that too. Like we all
Yeah.
went through that like period of like, oh my gosh, that's what happened. Like so then you have to like go back in your mind and say like, does that change the way I view this person now that I have this information? Can I reshuffle and readjust, like a filter or something when you have new data? It's just crazy. Um,
I always I haven't really met any I've only met one person who said, "I cannot forgive your mom. I do not care what happened to her." I had only one person.
Well, what happened to that person? Like then that person probably has a lot of stuff they're carrying around too, you know? Most of the
Exactly.
time, people's reactions to things are based on their own stuff to basically everything.
And most people, which was important to me, that my mother's story be told, and that people would have compassion on others with mental health issues, because I did. I did. I mean, I grew up in a way that I'm so thankful that I don't have mental health issues, and most of my siblings do, and they didn't quite come out. And so often it's just not the fault of the person. It's what's happened to them. And you see that in American Daughter. You see what happened to my mother, and it makes perfect sense how this can happen to somebody.
I wanted, I know you are clearly protecting the privacy of some of your siblings, but in my
Mhm.
sort of, greed at your story, wanting more and more, I was like, I want a picture. I almost Googled and was like I was like, I can't do this. This is creepy now. If I'm trying to like Google your siblings, and your mom, and I was like, should I try to look up the articles? Like maybe I'll look and investigate it anyway.
Well, they're out there.
I know, I'm sure. Okay,
People
maybe,
do.
yeah.
People do all the time. I notice if I Google myself, I see what other people are Googling.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Right.
they're
What
Goog
what fills in
Well, we
after.
all do that, and I think in overcoming, I'll probably share more about some of the stuff that people really are interested in, similar to you, where they just wanted to know more, and it's not gonna hurt anybody by sharing.
So are your siblings, that you're still in touch with and that are remaining, are they okay with where you've sort of.
Well, so you know Dominic, who
Yep,
was kidnapped.
yep.
Um, yeah, he lives in New York,
Mhm.
and he's living his life. He's had a rough life, prison stays, and it's to be expected. He had a really rough life, and other siblings, I have one of my siblings has been diagnosed with 5 different mental illnesses, and he makes my mom look like a walk in the park, just to be honest. It's really, really scary. So, a lot of, they just a lot of this trauma, and honestly, like illiteracy. I mean, I didn't learn to read till I was 11 years old. We lived outside. We did not go to school. The first time I went to school was in my foster home, where I was held captive, is what I like to say, because I was literally tortured there. Was my first time in school. So you imagine how traumatic school was for me. And my siblings, you know, they were barely literate. Your early childhood is so traumatized like this. So it's
And I
just,
love how you talked about the boyfriend who worked at Radio Shack sitting there teaching you how to read. Like that was like, oh, that was just beautiful. I mean, heartbreaking, but beautiful. And even how you described Rick, and your complicated feelings about him and everything. And the passage, could I just read like a
sure.
paragraph? Is that okay?
Yeah.
When you were talking about Rick and how he always used to tell you that you were beautiful inside and out, and how he
Mhm.
said that to you over and over again. And then you said, on the morning of his funeral, a homeless woman came up to me in Starbucks, drawing closer than a stranger would. With no alarm at all, I let her reach out and touch my face. You're beautiful, she crooned. I can see you're
Mhm.
beautiful inside and out. It was Rick's mantra to me, and in that moment, I had no doubt that the message was from him. The gift of it knocked me out, rocked me from my roots of my hair to the soles of my feet. It was a moment as otherworldly as the one in that vintage bar at the piano, when music flowed from beneath my hands with no explanation. That was my first memory with Rick, and this would be my last, both of them shimmering, glittering with mystery.
Mhm.
Oh,
I
beautiful,
know. That made me cry
heartbreaking.
thinking about that moment at his funeral. And readers haven't been able to read about Rick, but Rick was a con man. Rick stole a mail truck and took us to Mexico. I mean, it's just stuff movies are made out of. This is like craziest stuff. But and he was a con man. He'd been in prison. He'd even taken someone's life in prison, and that didn't make the book. But I loved him. He was like Santa Claus to me. I mean, he'd show up here and there, drugged out. I'd be like, "Oh my God, he's back!" Like, yay! I loved Rick, and he when you read about his turnaround and his recovery from drugs and alcohol, became one of the most amazing human beings I'd ever met, and I loved him. We had a great relationship, and he even did things like, I'm a designer and I own these schools now. And, but he was the first person to take me to beautiful homes in Portland that he was working on as a contractor to show me what interior design really was. And he would take me to these beautiful houses. And it was like, I got to touch the fabrics. And so there were things about Rick that I think as a child I saw in him that nobody else saw. And even before he died, he asked me, "What did you see in me, and why do you love me? Are you crazy?" Like he would say, "Are you crazy? What in the world is wrong with you?" Please, Will.
That's so I mean, I love that relationship, and how, all these signs that you point out over and over in the book, right? That you
Yeah.
feel like, it's just, I don't know. This whole book is like there's some sort of like spiritual thread to everything, that is just so inspiring. I mean, I sound like a broken record, but you know.
I'm so glad you see that, because in so many ways, sharing my story, it has this like a little bit of a magical um, way in people's lives, because this book affects everybody in a different way, and then everybody in their own life. As crazy as this story is, as we've just laid out here, everybody sees themselves in American Daughter. Like it's a truly an American story, and I didn't set out to do that. It's just it is that.
Is this going to be a movie?
I'm sure it is. They're talking about a mini series, which I think would be far better than one movie. We all want a mini series, right?
Yeah.
We like to binge those.
I love how now the miniseries is rebranded as a limited series, as if it's like a completely different animal, whereas his
Yeah.
is exactly the same, but whatever. I'm just gonna let it go. But yes, it's great. A limited series is like a 10-hour movie. It's perfect. It's like
Yeah.
fantastic.
That's what we all really want.
Yeah.
And I think there's so much layering to the story. Like you said, from my story to my mother's story to our history to all the people in this book. I think it'll be a really good series. So we'll see. I know they're talking about it, working on it.
Okay. Well,
So
that
I'm
will be.
excited to hear about it.
Me too. Me too.
Mm.
Um, do you have advice to aspiring authors?
Yeah. Have you written a book? I didn't read that about you.
I have. I've written
You
a
have.
couple. I've written unpublished books. I have an anthology coming out very
You
soon.
do?
Yeah. So, Moms Don't Have Time to, a quarantine anthology, comes out in 2 weeks.
I Oh, really? Oh, that's
Yeah.
so exciting.
Yeah. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Oh, that's so exciting. My journey of publishing was really wild as this book is. So I published with Greenleaf, which is a hybrid publishing, and I published American Daughter because I like to learn the hard way on everything. So I published it. It went straight to #1 bestseller in memoir. I was on the Today Show, and it just exploded. And then HarperCollins bought the book 2 weeks later, took it off the market, and then I've had a fabulous experience with HarperCollins, and so that's kind of the next phase of American Daughter. So I've had the chance to do both, and I really love both experiences. So I think if you have a chance to work with a publisher, I think it's fabulous. But if you also get a chance to self-publish, I think it's a wonderful education for people. And I just don't think that people should tell you not to do something like this. If you want to write a book, do it. It's the best. It was one of the best experiences of my life. I'm free from it. I really, it was hard as it was. It was so fulfilling. I just think writing a book is so fulfilling. It's such a major accomplishment. And I just recommend, if that's something you want to do, to go for it. Don't let anybody tell you, oh, that book's been done before, or any of the negativity. I heard it all. I heard it all. I got the looks. Oh, who cares? What's another story? But even if I just did it for myself, it's fabulous. But the book's going to touch people's lives, and you need to go for it. You definitely want to know your audience. You want to be kind of clear about what the purpose of your book is for. So there's a lot of things. I want to teach a little class on publishing, because I feel like I've been successful as a self-publisher, and I've been successful working with a wonderful publisher like HarperCollins. So
Great. So we'll be signing up
that's next year.
Oh my gosh. Well, Stephanie, thank you. This book really touched me profoundly. As you've said, it's touched so many other people and will continue to do so. And I am just like so in awe of you, and like feel like I have this place in my heart for you now that I know so much about you and have gone through this like book journey here. And it's really amazing, and I'm thrilled to have you in book club at some point soon. And I just congratulate you from the bottom of my heart.
Well, I love being on your show. I love following you. I love your positive energy. So
Oh,
thank you for having me.
thank you. Thanks for coming. Thanks for following me.
Oh, I'm all in.
Amazing. All right. Have a great day.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you so
you.
much.
I'll talk to you soon. I can't wait to be in your book club.
Me too. Thank you. Okay.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
bye.